Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Geneva. We seek to meet you wherever you are on your journey and invite you to be part of this congregation in which we draw wisdom from all the world's religions, balanced with the insights of modern science. We seek to build a diverse, beloved community within our virtual walls and hope to inspire and accompany one another as we act for peace and justice in our larger world. In preparing for today's sermon, I was doing a bit of research, as usual. And as I was clicking around, my wife, Julia, asked me what I was doing. I told her I was preparing a sermon about Mother's Day, and I was wondering what I should talk about this year. She said, "Well, you could talk about me." But we both decided that bragging was unseemly. So back to the drawing board for me. But the joke rang a bell. Sure, I could talk about my wife and the amazement I have at the person that she's become over the 20-some years of our adult relationship and about maybe the 40-some years that I've been lucky enough to know her. She's the most interesting person I know. I could also talk about my own mother, the struggles she had growing up without a mother, being raised by her grandmother and great-grandmother, and the lessons she had to unlearn rather late in life about men and healthy relationships. I could talk about my dad's mother, woman I've actually never met, but whose presence has been like a ghostly hand, one I've really only become aware of in retrospect. Or maybe my step-grandmother, the woman who taught me words like manners and respect and demonstrated exactly how much food one can put on a plate before the laws of gravity cry foul. I could talk about my mothers-in-law, two very different women, united by their love and care for my wife and our little family. But today I want to do something a little different. I want to talk about my other mom and some of the many great people who have mothered me and use her as an example for that. People who have made me rethink what mothering means and what my own responsibilities are when it comes to mothering. But first, let's do our thing. With the mics still muted, I'm going to remove the spotlight just for a moment. And what I want you to do is hit that button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Yes, this is the interactive portion. The one that says view, I want you to pull that down until it says gallery. If you haven't activated your camera, this is an awesome time to do so. Now, you'll know everything is working right because the screen that was my face is now filled with tiny little boxes. Now, again, looking at all of those faces, this is your community. And in the spirit of our friend, the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III of Trinity Church here in Chicago, I want you to turn to one of those boxes, it doesn't matter which one, and say, neighbor, oh neighbor, we are called to care. Amen. Thank you. The story of Mother's Day starts, at least in part, with Julia Ward Howe, the author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And as some of you know, back in 1870, Howe wrote what became known as the Mother's Day Proclamation, inspired by the carnage of the American Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War and her disgust with the way men have handled things. She called upon mothers of all nationalities to band together to promote the, quote, amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace. It's a great vision. A vision of peace, and one she suggested was to be celebrated annually by the creation of a holiday. The holiday, unfortunately, was not adopted. Now, the second woman at the center of Mother's Day, as we know it, is Anne Reeves Jarvis, child of a Baptist minister and the mother of 13. Tragically, she lost all but 4 of her children to disease and unsanitary conditions that were pretty common during the Civil War time. Now, these losses led her to become an activist, organizing the so-called Mother's Day work clubs. And these groups worked to combat disease and infant mortality across what became West Virginia, with the goal of bringing clean water, clean food, education, and medicine to families. Now, during the Civil War, Western Virginia was sharply divided, and under Jarvis's leadership, the Mothers Clubs provided food and shelter to soldiers, regardless of their allegiance. When typhoid and measles ravaged the military camps in the area, these women nursed the ill on both sides. Jarvis dedicated her life to aiding the ones she saw most vulnerable and the most burdened, mothers and the children of those mothers. However, it is because of her daughter, Anna Jarvis, that we celebrate Mother's Day today. Wikipedia tells us that when her mother died in 1905, Anna Jarvis began her campaign, quote, to honor the person who has done more for you than anyone in the world. And her campaign was, as you know, successful. And in 1914, Woodrow Wilson signed the proclamation designating Mother's Day, held on the second Sunday in May as a national holiday. Odd fact, the spelling of Mother's Day has been something of a controversy and something I've gotten wrong countless times. So perhaps it's worth pausing to note that Anna Jarvis actually trademarked this in 1912 as, quote, second Sunday in May, Mother's Day, Anna Jarvis founder. And she specifically noted that mothers should, quote, be a singular possessive for each family to honor its own mother, not a plural possessive commemorating all mothers in the world. And now you know. It's ironic that Anna Jarvis was not a fan of what the day became. In 1923, Hallmark and other greeting card companies were selling Mother's Day cards. Mother's Day, flowers, candy, and gift giving became a national obsession. A day that was supposed to be about sentiment became thoroughly about profit. Jarvis threatened lawsuits, wrote editorials, organized protests, and it was even jailed for disturbing the peace, protesting. But the holiday went on to become its own thing. Over 50 countries now celebrate Mother's Day. And that now concludes our history lesson. I love Mother's Day. For me, it's a time to reminisce about my own mother. She died in 2003, so I like to pause and reflect, to remember her smile, her Spock-like arched eyebrows. I'm not sure I can quite really do it. I remember how easy it was to make Mom laugh. I've never really made it a practice to visit her grave. It's beautiful, but it has always been just a place. My memories always seem more important. And that sentiment is where I first started running across some challenges. My mom was hardly perfect. No one is. I mean, I think we've covered this more than once on Sunday sermons prior. But while my memories are admittedly rose-colored, many of us do not have such colorfully tinted experiences. And this lack really is one of the main concerns that I have with a holiday like Mother's Day. For many, it's like a pointed stick and one that can and does catch and poke the unwary. And I worry about that. Mother's Day can and should be sweet and positive and affirming. And also, women are more than motherhood. And Mother's Day tends to erase that. On this day, people who identify as women are routinely reduced not only to their biology, but what they're able to do with their biology. On Mother's Day, I'm reminded of the experiences of those who wanted to be mothers and could not be, the experiences of those who became mothers regardless of what they wanted, the experiences of those who had mothers who were, by choice or circumstance, not the mothers that they could have been. I'm reminded of those who have no interest in being mothers at all, and who nevertheless have that perfectly legitimate choice questioned today. And lastly, I'm reminded of those who have lost a mother, like me, or lost a child, and what Mother's Day will remind them of. Sex and gender, family and history and choice and science and psychology and experience and loss and everything make Mother's Day simultaneously one of the most central and most alienating of American holidays. And I want to acknowledge that. So today I'm not really going to talk about my mom. We will come back to her, I'm quite sure. I'm not going to talk about my amazing wife, though you should let her know that I said, this pains me. Now, I'm also not going to talk about the two women who were my mothers-in-law, remarkable people both with inspiring stories of their own. Instead, I want to lift up someone else, the mother of my best friend. Pat shares a name with my own mom. In fact, in my group of high school friends, half of our moms had the same name. It's kind of ridiculous. Pat H, Pat Z, Pat K, Pat R. There must have been something in the water back in the early 40s. I don't know, it's weird. But Pat Z earned her degree at Le Moyne in Syracuse. And inspired by JFK's ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, she joined her sister in the Washington, D.C. area to seek work with the federal government, to do her part, and to serve her country. She joined the Department of Labor as an economist, performing audits, and worked there until her son Ted and I were in grad school. She traveled, she taught, she led, she worked, she did well. My understanding, however, is that her tenure there was neither easy nor smooth. I can only imagine what it was like to be a woman in the federal government from the 1960s through the 1990s. Let's just say that I am not the least surprised that she chose an early buyout. I think she would have been about the age that I am now when she was suddenly faced with the potential of a midlife career change. Now, if you've been following along since January, you'll probably remember that I am the poster boy for midlife career changes. That is, I'm really all about them. And Pat Z was one of the first examples I got to see firsthand. A full-time government bureaucrat left that career and became a full-time professional artist. Kind of wish I could show you her work. She does collage. I am admittedly an unwashed heathen when it comes to art, but I have never seen anything like what she can do with color and texture. It just blows me away. Over time, Pat became a professor at the Maryland College of Art and Design, an artist mentor, and put on some incredible shows and exhibits. In exactly the way that my mom was quiet, Pat was not. Pat has a big personality, always has. Hands up, arms wide. She's all about hugs and fussing over you, listening and stories. Now, I've known Ted since Ted was Teddy, but we actually became friends in high school. This was long after her divorce, so every so often I'd have to go over to Pat's to pick up Ted for some adventure or other. And in that 5 to 10 minute window, I got to see her do guilt like Michelangelo could do paint, food like some kind of mob boss, and her general gusto for life was like going to a Gallagher show and sitting in the splash zone when he wheeled out the Sledge-O-Matic. She had candy, beverages, stories, hugs, advice, food, more advice, and an endless cheery enthusiasm for any and all of us. Her kindness and generosity have never wavered over the decades that I've known her. It's just who she is. In my memory, I can still see teenage Teddy enduring all of the loud, good-natured love, care, and abuse as if he were the cliffs of Dover. And like those cliffs, he has clearly been shaped by this ocean of love Pat has for him, a love that is endless and boundless and washes over him and every one of us in the splash zone. And that is, in large part, why I have only ever called her mom. She's the one that taught me that mothers and mothering is about more than biology. I've grown up and moved away, and even before that, Teddy long since stopped needing a ride, either to school or for a night out on the town, all of which means that I don't see mom much. Facebook, in that regard, has been something of a gift. This is how I get to see and share her art, and this is how she gets to see and share my kids. She's loving, kind, and as enthusiastic as ever, and her comments are always a gift. It's worth pausing to note that calling her mom has never taken anything away from my own mother. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. It's a testament to my mother that I was able to recognize and accept love from Pat Z. I saw that love in my mother. I see that love in my mother's-in-law, and in all of that, I'm grateful because I know that I am a very lucky person. And on this holiday, I think about those people I've been lucky enough to be mothered by, whether persistently or only in passing, and to acknowledge my debt to these experiences that have shaped me and what mothering means to me. I was taught, these people taught me that we are all called to care, that caring is something that I can do too, and that caring comes from and goes beyond my own family. Admittedly, I'm not always awesome at this, but I remember a few opportunities that I've had. The time I stopped for a case of cold water bottles and donuts before heading to a company meeting where I handed them out to my pathetic and hungover coworkers who were clearly old enough to know better. The time I helped a friend cry over a loss. The time I sat with a stranger at a bar and listened while they told me their fears for their son who was serving in Afghanistan. The time I bought lemonade from a toddler I'd never met and then began singing out loud and in full voice how amazing it was. The times I said small things to my nieces and the care I put into the meals I fed my nephews. All the times I sugared any or all of them up to unsafe levels. I remember at least some of the gentle questions and encouraging noises to their stories about Pokemon, a video game, or some Japanese comic. I like to think such things mattered to them, but it doesn't really matter. It mattered to me. And I wonder about Mother's Day. And like Anna Jarvis, I mourn what it's become. But Mother's Day doesn't have to be about flowers and cards and candy, though admittedly, those things are nice. Beyond the petty commercialism, Mother's Day could be so much more. And as we turn to the close, this is what's on my mind. I'm reminded of a cartoon I saw once that asked how it is that we Americans can care so much for children before they are born and so little for them after they are born. How we can wring our hands about the fate of the future and our children in one breath, and in the next scoff at the very idea of supporting mothers. It's baffling. On Mother's Day, I'm reminded of that scene in the book of Genesis when God is looking for Abel and Cain responds, "How should I know? I'm not my brother's keeper." We all know that this is the wrong thing to say. We know that this is not what a good person, a caring person, a loving person, a mothering person would say. We are supposed to care for each other. Caring is why we're here. And this day, this Mother's Day, this could be a day that asks more of us, to imagine motherhood as something more, to lean into the interconnected web of interdependent existence, and to see that the web is alive with intent, with purpose, and with love. Today we can ask, who would we have been if someone had mothered us? We can ask, what might we have done? And we can ask, what might we have been brave enough to attempt? And we can ask, who and how would we have been different if we'd been cared for when we'd fallen? And we can ask, who would we have been then? And we can ask, what could we have become? We can ask questions like this. Yeah, that's kind of what being a UU is all about. But with the asking comes the invitation. The asking sets the invitation there before us. The invitation to do that thing, to become that light, to care for that wound, to feed that ache, to hold that hand, to say that encouraging thing for the next one that comes along, whether that one is ours or not, so that they can be what we could not. So those of us in the village, even if we did not bring forth the life, the invitation that all of us have received nevertheless is to cherish life, to lift life up, to care for it, to nourish it, and to see it launched into the world bolder and stronger because we were there to help make it so. Because we are all called to care. This Mother's Day, I'm reminded of a simple truth. We are all mothers, and our world could be better. In fact, it is better because of you. So don't forget, take your vitamins, put your laundry away. Naps are healthy, get your vaccine, and don't forget to call. I love you. Amen. And as we prepare to leave this place, continue your journey in love. Care for one another and care for this, our earth. Do justice and make peace. And as you go, know that whatever taste or touch you've had in this time and place of hope, joy, love, or peace, that goes with you out into the world. We are different for having spent this time together. So remember, live boldly and with thanksgiving.